Hi everybody, and welcome to today's GG&A webinar on the empty nest syndrome, what to do when your members and donors age out of your cultural institution. I'm Lana Buseman from the marketing team here at GG&A, and we're very excited for you to join us. Before we begin today, I just want to go over some technical details. We ask that if you can, please log into WebEx before dialing in. Once you launch the webinar, a window will appear on your screen similar to what you see on slide 1. If you've already called in, please hang up and follow the instructions in the window to dial in. Then we will be able to associate your phone with your name. During the session, your phone will be muted. If you want to ask us a question directly, please raise your hand, and that will signal me that you want to ask a question, and I will unmute your line so you can speak with the presenters. We also encourage you to use the chat panel shown on slide 3 in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen for any questions or comments during the session. Please notice that we ask you to direct your question to all panelists so that the presenters and I can see it and field the question. At the end of today's session, we are going to ask everyone to take a 1-minute survey to let us know what you thought of the webinar, so please stick around for that. If at any point during the webinar you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please send my colleague Anthony an email at ahoell@grenzglier.com or call our meeting provider WebEx directly at 866-229-3239. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Suzanne.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for joining us today. We know that this is a topic that's of interest to a lot of different cultural institutions across the country, and it's certainly something that we at GG&A have discussed at length with Jenny, our wonderful client at the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. Represented on the call today are a lot of really terrific institutions, and so we would love to hear from you. In addition to your questions, as we go through the presentation, please send in your own stories about things that you've tried at your institution, what has worked, maybe what hasn't worked, and anything you care to share with the group. We would love to hear ideas from across the institutions. I seem to be having my own technical difficulties, so I just sent an email. If you would hold on 1 second while we fix that, I would appreciate it. Thank you. Sorry, I think we are, if you would hold on just 1 more minute. Thank you. Sorry about that. I am in now. So again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we will begin. So what are the things that we're trying to solve for today? Many of you work at organizations that have kind of empty nest problems as your audience outgrows your institution and your program. So what can we do to counteract the effects of that? Are there ways to keep our donors and members engaged continually so that we both have the chance to turn them into donors and also have the opportunity to keep them longer than our core audience might indicate? So specifically, we're going to talk about the challenges of age-specific organizations and audiences, and we realize that while some of you actually do have missions that call for a specific age group, many of you have institutions that while you can and do engage people of all ages, really know that the meat of your membership and visitorship is for a very specific age, particularly among young children. So what are the opportunities for engaging this group while they are currently members and then after the normal life cycle might indicate? So we're going to look at strategies for using analytics, for segmenting and targeting which of those folks you should really be honing in on, programming for some new audiences that maybe don't fall within the sweet spot of your normal programming, and are there tools you can use for communicating and cultivating with people throughout their life to keep them as engaged and as close to your institution as possible. Oops, there you go. As you can tell by that, I am not in control of the clicker. Unlike art museums or performing arts organizations, children's museums, zoos, aquariums, natural history museums target specific age ranges with their programming, and some, like the Children's Museum of Indianapolis, as I said, are very narrowly focused. Others know that there is, probably around school age, a real focus for families in joining and being engaged. Of course, this is a very narrow time frame in which to get people excited and really entrenched for the long haul with your institution. One of the big challenges, and we've talked about this a lot with the Children's Museum, is there is a real value proposition in membership. Certainly that's true across all cultural institutions. Art museums suffer from this as well, but it's particularly true, I think, with family-friendly organizations. As you well know, it's often, in fact, cheaper just to buy a membership if you have a certain number of children or grandchildren coming with you. So it's the better value, and it's not necessarily that a family is deciding we want a deeper relationship, but how can you foster that deeper relationship even if the reason they're doing it is economic? And on the flip side, people who are thinking about their membership as their relationship with the institution may think of that as their contribution for the year. We often talk about this in conjunction with our educational clients. Parents think, my gosh, I'm paying this exorbitantly high tuition. That's what I'm doing for the school right now. But the schools know that that tuition doesn't, in fact, cover the cost of education. So how can we remind people that we are grateful for their commitment through membership dollars, but that doesn't mean that that is the only opportunity to give, nor is it really covering the cost of all of the wonderful programming that they get to participate throughout the year. Of course, younger families often have less disposable income, so they're not maybe as charitably oriented. They also have less time, so we have to think about what are the benefits that are actually going to mean something to them, especially as, in a case like the Children's Museum, as they age out of our core demographic, and maybe they're not, they have busy lives, but they're not coming to the museum as part of that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny. Jenny is the Chief Development Officer at the Children's Museum of Indianapolis, certainly one of the finest children's organizations in the country, and a very prominent institution in its city, which I think also plays into some of the opportunity that Jenny has identified as she thinks about how to deal with the challenge of this particular problem. Jenny?
Thank you. I'm going to give you just a little bit of a snapshot of what we've done at the Children's Museum to engage these audiences and give you a little bit of information about the museum before I get started. So, and we tend to deal with very young families. That's our frequent user. But as we've thought about the age out process for us, we've looked at the entire life cycle of a potential customer, whether that's member, visitor, donor, all the way through. So we think of you from birth, literally, to teenage, to young professional, to having a family, to moving into empty nest and grandparents as well. Can I go to the demographics slide?
Yes.
Great. So just, if you're not familiar with the Children's Museum of Indianapolis, we're the world's largest children's museum by size. We have 1.2 million visitors. almost 35,000 member households, lots of Facebook fans and Twitter followers. So when we study these members and non-members, the majority are married and college graduates, and they have household incomes of $75,000 plus. As you can see from the age of our parents, the sweet spot for us is ages 25 on up to 44. These are families, as I've studied them, that are in an, like Suzanne mentioned, the value proposition of membership for them is very important, and it is sometimes tough to kind of communicate that message of philanthropy to convert them. And then there's the age of the child. So as a young parent, you will come to the museum when your child is very small. You're going to stay with us, as you can see there, till about age 9, and then you start to go through the process of aging out. And they live nearby. So a lot of our members are able to come frequently. Those 34,000 member households are really clustered in central Indiana. So our power users actually can come up to 2 times per month. So what happens when kids get to be age 10? What's a very real scenario for us is based on what we're called. We're called the Children's Museum. Families are frequent visitors, but kids start to get a sense around age 10 or 12 that they're growing up and maybe they're kind of getting too big for this place. The Children's Museum, that's for little kids. That's what I did when I was a little kid, and so it's almost for them like a rite of passage to outgrow us. So when we think about that, we need to think about a couple of different things. What things could we do to keep teenagers and older children engaged and feeling like, or giving them what teenagers need to feel special coming to an organization like this? But then there's lots of adults that don't have kids yet in Indianapolis, or empty nesters that kids are out of the household that we'd love to attract as well. And one of the great things about the mix of what you'll see programmatically that we're able to do and through our exhibitions is our mission is really centered on family learning. So while we do have exhibitions here that there's a sweet spot in terms of age range for the child, every single exhibit is going to have something for all ages, except for one gallery, and that's our early childhood gallery. That's sort of a special space for ages 5 and younger. But beyond that, every other exhibition that we have is going to think about intergenerational learning and how the entire family interacts. We have been able to have an exhibition mix that helps with that. So we've been able to host blockbuster exhibitions like King Tut at our organization. And what I'm particularly excited about is we're going to be hosting this summer a Terracotta Warriors exhibition. But in this case, instead of renting the exhibition, we get to develop it ourselves. So while it'll have all the wonderful antiquities and objects from China, we're going to get to design it for families and make it interactive. I think these topics make it so that it's still cool to come back if you're a teenager. A lot of these topics they're studying in school as middle schoolers and high schoolers, so we've even seen field trips with older kids come through on these things. And then if King Tut or the Terracotta Warriors in town, it's a blockbuster enough type of topic that we can attract young professionals, mature adults without kids, to the Children's Museum. Here are some of the things we do through earned income and individual giving to tackle these challenges. Actually, and I joke about this a little bit, but it's really wonderful. The Children's Museum is able to host, and we're right in prom season, right, lots of high school proms. So they're very, very safe events. They come with lots of parent chaperones and school security and all kinds of things. But if you think about where maybe you attended your prom, the museum can offer a setting. So if you're the kind of kid that likes to dance and socialize, you've got that aspect that we can do for you at the museum. Then if you're the kid that really doesn't want to do that, there's lots of great exhibits to go visit as well. I've been to proms at the Children's Museum just watching to see how they go, and a lot of the kids are really having a good time. It's an environment that it's okay to be back at the Children's Museum. One of the other things that we're doing in our individual giving programs, our donor memberships are including benefits where we're going to go behind the scenes. And a lot of our behind the scenes really isn't, if you're an object-based museum and you have a collection, having little kids in your collection probably isn't something that you're going to do. So those benefits to attract those older kids, or that's maybe your next phase of what you do at the museum, is go behind the scenes, want to learn a little bit more about what we do, or we use a lot of the extraordinary scientists, artists in residence, and other well-known adults to give you access in a more intimate setting to some of the adults that are doing programming at the museum for those kids. And then 2 years ago, we decided that we were approached by an organization that wanted to partner with us on an event, and it was a great opportunity to try to attract the young professional audience. We had done some of the things that I'm sure your organizations have done as well. We'd formed a young professionals kind of council to help volunteer, but hosting this event and we call it Adult Swim, a night of play for your inner child. It's just one night a year, and we transform the museum into sort of what we call an adult playground. And I've hosted many events at the museum. I've seen how adults interact. Most of my events tend to be pretty formal with donors. This was something where we were really going to try to encourage play and the adults that came, not just hang out by the food and beverage, but also play, and it really, really worked. The target audience that we were trying to attract, we achieved. The event sold out, and 2,000 the first year, 2,500 the next year. It's in February, so it's not a really great weather month for the Children's Museum, but it sells out nonetheless, and the weather was good both years. And it's a fundraising event, so we were able to have a net proceeds as well. And if you could just see how these grown-ups play at the Children's Museum. So we have lots of crawl-throughs and special spaces that if you're 3, you will see them before mom and dad see them, right? They're kind of a cool, like, little way to get up close to an exhibit. These grown-ups find those things too. They colored Hot Wheels cars. They did all the activities. They had a really great time. But the only way that we could reach this audience was through strategic partners. So we had to find organizations that knew how to connect to the young professionals because the museum didn't have expertise in that. So we worked with Yelp and our local sort of arts free weekly newspaper, Indie Hub, which is the largest young professionals group, a sports organization that was like flag football leagues, volleyball leagues, that most of their members, 20,000 plus members, were age 30 or younger. So if you're a grown-up and you don't have kids, picture whether or not you'd feel comfortable coming to a children's museum, right? So we make this a night that we shout from the rooftops that we want you to come visit. Adult Swim, the theme of that is the moment in the pool in the summer where the lifeguards blow the whistle and the kids have to get out of the pool, right? So we do that at the museum, and it's a very fun night. The favorite story, you can tell that there are 20-somethings that were here as a child that are seeing something that they remember from childhood. And if I could capture the moment on their face where they see an object or an exhibit that they knew from their childhood and how excited they get, I've actually seen people pointing and jumping up and down. They're having that good of a time, sort of reconnecting with their childhood experience. This last year, we added a text to give options. We thought, when we have this candid audience, how are we going to, they've already made a donation by supporting the event, buying a ticket, but how do we kind of further that effort or try to capitalize on it? We did a text to give campaign. It was kind of modest. Next year, I'm going to try to do something different. Because it's an arts-related event, we do a lot of arts programming. We're going to actually share our case for support for an arts project that will be on the campus of the museum, not inside the museum, but it's a greening public art project that'll be just north of our campus to see if that engages people further. And then this summer with Terracotta Warriors, we're going to try to not do a full-scale kind of Adult Swim, but we're going to try to use some of the same partners plus new ones to attract adults to Terracotta Warriors after hours throughout the summer.
Jenny, we have a question from a participant who would like to know what kind of offerings did you have in terms of refreshments, and were you allowed to serve alcohol at Adult Swim?
So we did. We, as a general rule at the museum, for outside, you could host your wedding at the museum and have alcohol, and that's fine. For our internal events, it depends on the audience and what we're doing. For Adult Swim, yes. we actually, a lot of part of our net proceeds was through beverage alcohol sales. We limit it, we wristband, we ID. I've worked in events along with development for quite some time, so I refer to myself as Mama Birch. I wanted to make sure everybody was safe. So drink tickets, bartenders monitoring consumption, food equivalent to consumption. So it's a really safe night. But if we didn't have that, I don't know that we would attract an audience that large. I think they expect it.
There's actually another question from the audience, wondering if it was a full bar or if you offered a cash or open bar.
It was a cash bar, and we focused on a local brewery provided in-kind product, and then a local winery provided free product. And we had one spirits vendor that had a special bar. So no full bars at this particular event. Then we have restaurants that are sampling food as well.
Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome. So Terracotta Warriors, as I mentioned, we're going to use that to try to keep talking, communicating with the folks that have come to Adult Swim in the past, see if they might be interested in just the one exhibition experience in Terracotta Warriors versus a full night at the museum. We're also, we very much know that, as I said, people don't visit at age 10. That's exactly when membership starts to trail off too. The value proposition becomes increasingly difficult as they're not able to use the facility as much. But I do think, I'm not an empty nester, but I'm not a young professional either. I do think that there is an interest in some of our exhibit topics with adults without kids or coming without their kids. We used to joke, I mean, we actually get pretty consistent comments from cheerful adults that just want to know when they can come when there's not kids. So this will give them a few more options to do that throughout the year. I do also, one of my sort of theories that I'm testing with this Terracotta Warriors is member families have a lot of really, really fond memories of visiting when their kids were young. And so I'm trying to see if reconnecting with those fond memories by coming back to the institution or a good reason to come back for an experience might convert them to donorship. And then we're going to expand our strategic partners. So one of those that I'll talk about in just a minute is AARP, which if you've seen their commercials, when I studied the AARP brand, and this was more in the past around our grandparent audience, they really are about lifelong learning. We are young, we are active, we want to get out and do stuff. So AARP is this sort of vibrant brand that we felt like as a children's museum, when you reach that grandparent stage or mature adult stage, whether or not you have grandkids, would be a good strategic partner for us to drive audience, because again, I don't have direct access to that audience. And then we're also using target analytics. So the PRISM clusters that sort of indicate which adults, mature adults, are without kids, we're going to target them more specifically. So I'll promote these events with my entire member base, donor base, et cetera, but I'm going to do some additional marketing to the folks that we feel might fall in that sweet spot of being attracted to an event like this.
So one of the, and I'll go through some of our themes again and give some examples from other institutions, but one of the things that Jenny and I talked about in advance of this webinar was setting some realistic expectations of what these kinds of efforts will bring. It is not realistic to think that you're going to be able to keep at that same renewal rate that you have among families in your kind of sweet spot of membership, to keep that renewal rate across the life of that member family. What we're looking for is creating opportunities to re-engage them at different times. Some of them will become lifelong donors. We don't want to discourage that, certainly, but we think, what are the communications and targeting techniques you can use to get people engaged as you have programming that is of interest to them. It isn't just that in Jenny's case, once somebody becomes 10 years old, the next chance to engage them is when they have a 2-year-old. We're looking at, specifically people who are embedded in this community, what are the opportunities for engaging them throughout their life cycle? And one of the important pieces of that, and I know Jenny has talked a lot about this previously, is those partners. Who are the partners across your institution that are going to be really critical to coming up with these plans? How do you, for instance, work with marketing? You know, membership may reside in marketing, it may be part of development, but how do you work with your marketing folks? And I'll talk a little bit about that to make sure that you're really sending out consistent messages, looking for those opportunities to promote what's happening at your institution in a way that's really going to not only interest, but actually just reach all of the audiences that you're trying to draw in. So now specifically around analytics, we've talked about using analytics to target and segment members and visitors. You know, one of the things that we often see our clients do is dealing with, for instance, membership renewals in a very lockstep way. And we've seen clients do much better with very targeted approach to upgrades, and certainly this goes for donors as well. Not every member family is created equal. How do you pick out those families that look more like your donors? So we think spending some time on your part, not just looking at capacity, but also potential inclination, so you know which of those members are the ones you're really going to want to focus on to try and keep them engaged and talk to them maybe about donor opportunities as their kids age out. You want to be targeted because you know you're not going to have success rate with all of them. And to do that, you use a combination of wealth screening products, demographics, and behavioral data, you know, visitation, purchases, all of the things you would normally look at, but really focus on those, I think, again, to be very specific about who are you trying to reach here. One of the things that I would say is a missed opportunity among a lot of our cultural clients is not getting people to come back often enough during their membership year, particularly their first 2 years of membership, when we all know that they're more vulnerable to not renewing. But the more people, if they've purchased as a value proposition, the more times they come back, the more likely they are to renew. So I think creating as strong a bond as possible during that time when they are members. And if perhaps they've rejoined because, as Jenny said, terracotta warriors, what are the other things you can offer in that 1 to 2 year re-engagement that will make them see that being a part of your institution is something that they're going to just want to do. And I think as you go into an opportunity, particularly as it works, as the Children's Museum saw with King Tut, to develop a program, again, with your high quality prospects around the first 2 years of re-engagement is really critical. And again, you know, you want to do this while they're still engaged as much as possible. So here we have this wonderful demographic that shows you how we acquire new people, identify through high quality membership and upgrade the prospects that we think look most like our donors and move them along. I want to give you an example here from the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, which is a longtime client of GG&A, and their member demographics is actually the opposite of the Children's Museum. They tend to be older. And for any of you who are familiar with this organization, their big annual event is the Philadelphia Flower Show. And it's a terrific event, and lots of people join every year because of the flower show. You do get a certain number of tickets. It is in fact a true value proposition for the member. So in talking with them about how to focus on who among those members they should concentrate on for long-term renewal and also to get to be donors, we took a kind of after and before approach. So we looked at the members who joined because of the flower show, and using some wonderful tools GG&A Analytics offers, we were able to look at not only who has ability, but who has inclination. So who among these first-time members look like our donors, using marketing segmentation like you find in the Nielsen Claritas kind of marketing segments. which of these categories appear most frequently among the members of PHS. So we were able to pick out those people who look not just like members, but kind of long-term members, higher-level members, donors to the institution, and come up with a plan for really engaging those people. Now, because they had a very strong partnership between advancement and marketing, the marketing folks thought that was a really interesting thing to look at, and decided to use information. Okay, so if we've identified this is the kind of marketing profile of somebody who's likely to be a PHS donor, what do we do to reach out on the ticket buying side, so the before part? How do we promote the PHS Flowers Show in ways that will actually attract ticket buyers who already look like our donors? You know, thinking that those advertising in those places, not only does the wide scope of people, you know, it looks like a good place to advertise our show, but we're going to get kind of the best of the people who look like them. They're going to be better membership prospects. So they were able to really partner and come up with a way to promote the event and then move those people through membership and then hopefully to long-term donors to the institution. And I think that was a really interesting thing and innovative, because they weren't just thinking about what do we do once we engage them. They were thinking about how do we make sure the right people actually come through the door so that we can engage them. And targeted communications is obviously key to this. Using the data you have to better target communications to members and non-members. And again, with an institution where you do have an age-out issue, I think one of the things that you need to think about is, will we continue to communicate with a certain number of lapsed members beyond what we would normally do with a lapsed member? So if we know that we will continue, you know, trying to renew them in different ways over a 5-year cycle, but after, you know, 6 months after they drop, we're not going to send them the newsletter anymore. You may want to consider, are there ways to continue to regularly communicate with these folks so they just know what's going on, and it's not always about asking them to rejoin. Certainly social media offers lots and lots of low-cost ways to do that, but, you know, could you do campaigns that are specifically around, we haven't seen you and we'd like to see you? Are there ways that you can consider, if you've got a really great publication, are there a certain group of people that you think have long-term potential for your organization that you should just bite the bullet and put money in your budget to mail to them? I think considering those things in ways that are not just about treating them as lapsed members can do a lot to make sure that, you know, then when Jenny comes in with her Adult Swim invitation or sends out promotional materials about have your wedding here, those are audiences that are just much more ready to respond affirmatively, and they already feel connected to the institution because you've got them connected. And I think that's an important and, again, often a missed opportunity. The other thing is, you know, when people come in and are re-engaged through this process, to immediately start to treat them like they're an important member of your family. One of the examples I like to use here is the Metropolitan Museum of Art. They often have, you know, real blockbuster exhibitions around their Costume Institute, and a few years ago, as many of you know, they had an Andrew McLean exhibition, which was, you know, overwhelmingly successful from a visitorship perspective. And they had a huge number of people, myself included, I'm embarrassed to say I'd let my membership lapse, who joined to jump the line because the line was crazy long. So it was, of course, a value proposition, a time savings. But in the final few days of the show, they had to stop letting members do that because it was just too crowded. So immediately, the executive director sent out a note explaining to all members, explaining why this was happening and apologizing. Then the Monday after the exhibition closed, he sent out this great email to all members saying that, you know, we so appreciate your patience and your goodwill, and because you are a member and this is your museum, I know that you're going to be as excited as I was to learn that, you know, this was the net proceeds basically, and this is what we accomplished with the museum by getting so many people in the door, what we've been able to do for the Costume Institute, and really started to treat people, even people like me ostensibly who, you know, joined to jump the line, as if they were deeply entrenched in the organization and really cared. And I think it probably would have been just as easy not to think it through and to decide we're going to send it to our longtime members. We're going to not send it to people who just joined because, you know, this doesn't really pertain to them, this message of I'm sorry you were inconvenienced, you know, but instead, the museum looked at it as an opportunity to start to talk to those people like they were the insiders, like they had a long-term relationship with the museum that was going to last beyond this exhibition, and not to treat them like people who had joined just for the value proposition. I thought that was really smart to immediately start to have that conversation as if, well, you know, you're part of us. Let us, you know, talk to you in that way. So we did get another question from somebody, and this is a good one. This is like my wonderful friends at PHS, somebody who works at a television station where most of the members and donors are over 60. What strategies can we use to encourage those from a younger age range to become members or donors? That is a very good question, and one we get a lot from our friends at cultural institutions. I think you know, horticultural and gardening programs like PHS are probably the far end of that spectrum, but they're not the only ones. You know, I would say my perspective on this is a little different. I remember when I was in college, you know, many years ago, there was a discussion about arts donors and patrons aging out, what would happen when those people died. And that's been an ongoing conversation. So one of the things that I would observe is it's not that we shouldn't be working on this problem, but it seems to me that people tend to almost age into arts patronage. So there is, it seems, a you know, a continuing group of people who have more time and disposable income interested in the arts, who as they get to their phase of their life continue to will start to become more engaged. So that's, I guess, my silver lining. In terms of what to do to get people interested, I do think that the kind of neglected group is often people maybe 35 to 55. Lots of organizations focus a lot on young professionals, people in their 20s and 30s. Now, I will say, in Jenny's case, bringing in people in their 20s to, you know, early 30s for Adult Swim is brilliant marketing, because we saw on her demographic slide that the average parent member is like 32 to 45. So she's getting them in and creating some great, you know, great will towards the institution, getting them re-engaged and making them feel good about the museum right before they're going to be her target audience. So that, I think, is very smart. I would say for arts organizations, looking at ways to engage people in their 40s and 50s can be even more important than trying to create programs in your 20s and 30s. Some of the things that we have seen work here have been, as Jenny talked about in her presentation, some things that people can do with teenage children, some special programming, things that will really truly be of interest to both. I think that's been a good way. Adults at that age are looking for things that their kids will want to do with them. I think that it is important to recruit some volunteer leaders in that age group who can act as peer leaders. It's very easy for people to say, you know, I'm very engaged in my children's school and those sorts of things. So you need somebody who's going to lead by example and can get people excited. Those are some of the things that we've seen work at our cultural institutions. Jenny, do you have anything to say about those age groups and how you've gotten them involved?
Well, just that I had to think about why they wouldn't normally come to the Children's Museum. And for someone in their 20s and 30s, if they don't have kids, it's really that they're going to feel strange coming here without one. You know, oh, I need a niece. I have to grab my niece if I can visit, or they feel like they have to have a child with them. So thinking about why they wouldn't normally visit and then creating something for them that solves that for them, really. My next challenge is trying to figure out how to convert them into a more regular visitor without having to put on an event as extensive as Adult Swim to engage them.
Jenny, the other question we just got, can you give us an example of something that didn't work?
Yeah, so, you know, what I'll say about the marketing team here at the museum, they are pros at knowing exactly how to identify target audience to drive visitation. And so if I can sort of tag on to that and ride that wave, it works out well for me. But when I kind of go off into the non-traditional visitor audience, like an adults-only audience, I had an experience with the King Tut. I mentioned I'm doing a Terracotta Warriors After Dark. I did a Tut After Dark, too. And I think like 15 people came. So like it was one of those, it taught me that I really had to have those partners that could reach that audience, because just because I offered it, it didn't automatically mean that people would come.
And that's one of the other takeaways that you know, if you need to, you can invoke our names here. You have to have some flexibility and some ability to fail. If you're going to try these programs to reach people that you are not traditionally reaching, to engage new audiences, new age levels, you're going to try some things that don't work right off the bat. I mean, Jenny's example was a great one because she also learned something from it and then was able to take that learning and turn it into a successful event. I think one of the problems